Our star boy of this series, Itadori Yuji, is yet to say the eternal words, domain expansion, or Yuik Tenka. And when he eventually does say those words, the whole fandom will be crying of joy, as we have been waiting for this moment for a long time. And when that moment does happen, I hope it's at a point in the story where Yuji can at least use it against Sukuna. Because after all the abuse Sukuna has given to Yuji, if Yuji were to use his domain expansion against Sukuna, it will make that groundbreaking moment in the story that much more sweeter. Now, there are a few possibilities to what Yuji's domain expansion could be, and we're at that point in the story where we can actually have fun with our speculations, because it literally can be anything. So guys, please, let's have an open mind and let's start discussing what it could be. Firstly, what do we know so far about the domain expansions in this story? If there's a specific trait that's only associated with one character and that character alone, then chances are that character's domain expansion will also be connected to that specific trait. Look at the domain expansions we have seen so far in the story. Episode 7 of Season 1, Jogo unleashed Coffin of the Iron Mountain, and Gojo released Unlimited Void. Coffin of the Iron Mountain is basically a volcano which is linked to Jogo's fire attacks and his fiery personality. Unlimited or Infinity Void, whichever you want to use, traps the user inside the limitless dimension, feeding them unlimited information, rendering them immobile. Gojo is constantly re-energizing his brain, as stated in chapter 76 when he is using reverse curse technique to make sure his brain doesn't fry up. So naturally, his domain expansion is a technique that not only sends the user to the limitless dimension, but it also directly attacks and targets the brain. DAGON, one of the special grade curses working with Kenjaku, was born from the fear of water-based natural disasters. And guess what's his domain expansion? Horizon of the Captivating Skanda, which is a beach area which allows him to control the sea, as well as the fish like Shikigamis that reside within the ocean that he is controlling. Your tribal chief's personal favorite domain expansion, Deadly Sentencing, from the one and only Higuruma, who happens to be a real lawyer in this series, and his domain expansion is basically a court trial where the trial can end in either guilty or an innocent verdict. So just with these examples alone, and believe me, I could have used so much more from the story, but just by seeing these examples, there is a pattern here. All these characters that I mentioned with their domain expansions have that one thing about them that connects with their domain expansion. Whether it's something to do with their personality, what type of job they're working at, what their curse technique is, or even their hobbies like Hakari, who runs a fight club which involves sorcerers doing hand-to-hand combat for money. And his domain expansion is the infamous Idol Death Gamble, which is a pachinko-themed domain that enters all participants into a gambling game. I won't go full detail into his domain expansion, as that in itself is a 30-minute video, but as you can see, Hakari is a gambler, so his domain expansion is linked with his gambling. Now the question is, what is Yuji's thing? What is that one thing that is uniquely connected to Yuji's character and no one else? Could it be movies? Yuji loves talking about movies, so maybe a cinema could be his domain expansion. And don't worry guys, I'll go into detail in another video how that might be a possibility. But if we actually think about what we have seen with Yuji that makes him stand out from the others, it's his brute strength and his way of fighting. Every fight we have seen from Yuji so far has been a brawl. Yuji's fight with Chozo was literally a back alley brawl. And as I've mentioned in many of my videos, Yuji was called Mirko Prokop, who is a former champion in Bellator MMA. One of the commenters on one of my videos gave me the idea that what if Yuji's domain expansion is a UFC octagon ring? You can laugh at that, but it makes sense. Look at episode 8 of season 2 of Jujutsu Kaisen. It's staring at us right in the face. Yuji went toe-to-toe against that locust curse spirit. He literally went hand-to-hand combat against that curse spirit and obliterated him. The Black Flash attack is literally a punch. Not some ki blast or an energy ball, it's literally a punch. And yes, I know there's cursed energy surrounding his fists, but still, he has to punch his opponent in order for the damage to be done. So essentially, it's a powered up punch with cursed energy. Because Yuji is a fighter that prefers physical combat, it would make sense for him to have a domain expansion that is linked to his fighting style. We have seen this already in the story in chapter 196 with Mio, who is a sumo wrestler, and his domain expansion is basically a sumo fight if both the challenger and the one being challenged agree to have a sumo fight. So is it that far-fetched to think that potentially eventually Yuji could have a UFC ring as his domain expansion? I don't think so. When it comes to his potential domain expansions, if we are going with the combat ring narrative, there's 3 options. One being a UFC ring where both users have a UFC fight. Another option could be a boxing ring where the users will have a boxing fight. And another could be a wrestling ring where we see a classic old school wrestling match. I personally think a UFC ring would be the best option, as Yuji doesn't just punch. He literally does everything. Go back and read his fight against Chozo. Literally MMA, boxing and wrestling style moves Yuji does in that fight. So a ring that allows him to do all sorts of fighting styles and techniques would be best for him. Now, will there be any conditions to his domain? I think, just to make it that much more interesting for the audience to read, I think the direct hit, which the domain expansion usually gives its main user to do, will have to be a knockout attack. But because this hypothetical domain expansion is in a UFC ring, and in an official MMA fight, both fighters can attack from the get-go, it's not like one fighter has to attack the other one first. So I'm thinking, to enhance the stakes, the first attack each user will have will be the knockout attack. But it's up to the opponent to tank it if they're strong enough, and because this is Yuji's domain expansion, the opponent will not be using any of their special attacks. The attack that the users will be using inside the domain will be the Black Flash. Whoever's Black Flash attack knocks out the opponent first wins. And because Yuji's domain allows him to have a direct hit, it will be a direct Super Black Flash attack against his opponent, who will need to tank it if they were to survive the domain. That's what I think Yuji's potential domain expansion could be, and its conditions as well. Like I said earlier guys, this is just a fun little theory video I wanted to make, and it's thanks to the commenter Barber798. Shout out to you mate, you gave me the idea when you commented on my Yuji is the third Honored One video. I always thought that Yuji's domain expansion will be combat focused, but actually having a UFC style ring as his domain expansion makes perfect sense. But anyway, I want to go over to you guys now. What do you think Yuji's domain expansion will be? Do you agree with my theory here in this video, or do you think it will be something completely different? Let me know in the comments down below, and of course, don't forget to subscribe to the Shaman Tribe.